welcome to another tutorial video. Today's one is a technique that I kind of touched upon in one of my tonic craft kit unboxing videos, and I was saying I'd been doing it with some stencils as well, where you just use water on your, through your stencil, and then you flip the water from your stencil onto another piece of card. Then you use Nouveau Shimmer powders, your Pixie powders, Pixie burst, Pixie sparkles, anything you want to that's like a powdered pigment. There's like brush-os and colour bursts and everything as well. And you just sprinkle them onto the water and then leave it to completely dry, and then once the water has completely dried, you can brush off all of the excess and you're left with this beautiful mottled watercolour kind of effect, which I don't think you could really achieve in another way. This one I've actually used 5 different colours of powders on here, and I don't think you could ever like have used them through a stencil and get the waste like off the stencil in such like crisp areas of being like distinct colours. I think it would all sort of meld together a little bit too much. So I think this is quite a unique kind of way to get this sort of style of background. And I've just finished these off really simply with a vellum snowflake from Sue Wilson's collection from 2021 and one of Francoise's stamps. I think that was also 2021 as well, but I only bought it recently because I just love that scripty font that she's used on there. And there's so many sentiments on that set. We're going to use 4 of them all together because I've used 2 on these cards, and when these backgrounds are dry I'll finish them off with the other 2 sentiments as well. But that is using the water that was left on the stencil, and then this is using the water that you have sprayed through the stencil. And I really loved the way this mix of colours worked as well. I was kind of just flying blind and I picked 5 colours off my shelf. There's like a pink, there's a sunset glow, which I think maybe has a little bit of orangey red in it. I've got Into the Blues, which is a beautiful blue pixie sparkle, and then I also picked purple Orchid and green Jasper. So you've got coral, pink, blue, purple and greeny Jasper colour as well, but I think it made a really cool colour combination. And I actually had bought this little set of a mix of sequins. It's called Deep Sunset, and would you believe that all of these different ones that I've used on here, these beautiful deep blues and purpley sequins, plus these red ones that picked out the sort of pinky red tones in this one, were all from just this one pack with all of these like sunset kind of colours in there. But it's like the perfect pack to go with these, even though there's no green sequins in there. A lot of them reflect green, so I thought they'd work really, really nicely. So this technique is pretty simple to do, and you can do it with any stencil that you have as well. So I might revisit this in the future with a different kind of stencil as well. I do think though that ones that have got lots of pattern close together are really lovely, or also loose organic floral kind of patterns look really good for this as well, because I think these larger patterns you can get beautiful speckles of colour within these. But I mean, whatever kind of stencil you use, you are going to get one that looks more spread out than the other one, because whichever way round you're doing it, you're using both the positive and the negative. So one's going to have more and one's going to have less. So I don't think it really matters what kind of stencil you use. But I thought this Christmas tree one, which is a That Special Touch one from CRaFTi Expressions from quite a few years ago, I'm not sure if they make it anymore, but it's a really lovely Christmas tree one that you might already have in your stash, or you might have some other Christmas stencils as well. So to start with this, I'm going to move those out of the way so I don't get them messy. I've got 2 easy clean mats here just so I can move them out of the way so they're not in the way on my desk and I can carry on doing other stuff while these are drying. And I've got 2 A5 pieces of card, because to make these 2 cards I use roughly like an A6 piece, and there's no way you're ever going to get like a complete background over a whole A5 piece, especially when you're just using a 6x6 stencil. But you might end up with some leftover pieces from the sides that you could also use. I've ripped along this edge, so we might finish this card as well later on when all of these bits are dry. I haven't decided yet. And I've also got this sort of like splattery bit off the edge too. So move those back out of the way. And then we want to get our first piece of cardstock, and when you add water to card, it does want to bow up. So the idea is that you spray both sides of your cardstock, so each side is an equal amount of wetness, so it's just going to stay flat as if both sides were dry. It will kind of just stay flatter. So because we are going to add quite a bit of water to the front of this to spray through this tree one, It's not particularly important for the other one, but for this tree one we are going to put quite a bit of water through it to try and get all of the trees to be sort of visible in water. So I think it's better to have added a little bit of water onto your Easy Clean mat, spread it around a little bit so you'll kind of get more of an even coverage over the whole of your cardstock, then press your card into that water and then take your stencil and spray over the top. You want to use, I'm using this water bottle, which I will link below. You want to get a nice even mist across the whole thing, and I've even got little speckles of some powder from previous projects as well, but you want to get a nice even mist so that you can see that all of the trees are covered, but you also want to make sure your stencil has a lot of water on it as well. So we can carefully slide that off to one side, bring in our next Easy Clean mat and put our card on there, and then we can carefully pick up the stencil and flip it over so the wet side is down. And then I like to get my roll of, sorry that's casting a shadow, I like to get my roll of kitchen roll and like press across so you know that you're getting a good contact all the way across, and you're not going to like pick up any of the water that squidges out on your hands and spread it around to different areas. So I like to do that. And then we can lift that stencil off, put it to one side, and I don't know if you can tell, but if I tip that in the light, yeah, there you go, you can see the outline of all of the trees, and then this one has the actual trees. I have used quite a bit of water, so I don't want to tip that too much, you might not be able to see that one. But then, now we can put both of these, if we put them side by side, like this, we can do them both in one go and you should be able to see them both. You might not see the full beautiful effect straight away. Sometimes you have to kind of wait a little bit for the full effects to kind of appear and everything to have spread out and stuff. But first of all I'm going to start with the Sunset Glow, which is a Pixie sparkle. And I'm just going to go tapping it all over the place. Don't be too precise where you put it. I think the more random you are with this kind of a technique, the better results you kind of get, because you're not disappointed that you know, colours didn't stay as discreet or something on your background as you wanted them to be. So it's quite nice just to be completely random, and you can just tap it all over the place. So we've gone Sunset Glow first, then I'm going to go Fuchsia Rose. This one comes out quite quickly, so I'm going to do a little bit less of that. And then we've got Into the Blues, which is another Pixie sparkle. This one always comes out really slowly, so you might think I'm tapping this a lot, but it's just, I don't know what's up with the bottle, but it always comes out slowly, this one. So I'm going to be doing more tapping than normal. I really like this colour though. I've used this quite a bit. I like that it's got like a light blue, a dark blue, and almost like a purpley kind of tone in it as well. And on this one, make sure you get those edge pieces, because that's what gives you that lovely splattered kind of effect as well. Okay, so maybe a little bit more on this one. Okay, then we're going to go with a couple of Pixie bursts, and I've left these till last because the Pixie bursts are quite overpowering. They are really pigmented, so you want to be lighter handed with these, and they'll sort of spread out quite a bit. So I mean, as like it sort of dries and the water sort of moves it all around, this will be quite visible. And this is the, oh, I actually did the purple one first last time. Let's go back with the purple one first. This is the purple Orchid, and then I came in with the green Jasper afterwards. But they're beautiful colours, these, and they're really versatile, your Pixie bursts, because they don't have sparkle in them, so you can use them just as regular watercolours if you want to as well. You can have a little palette and keep a little palette there with all of your little like tappings out of your Pixie bursts that you can use as your watercolours. Or you can just tap a little bit out as you need it. You can splatter with them, you can use them like mica powder kind of things, you can do mix them with your paste, you can mix them with mousses, you can mix them with polishes, all sorts of different things. And because they are a flat colour, it's really nice because a lot of products, they have so much shimmer in them, you need something flat to go along with them so that it balances it out. And I really like the Pixie Bursts for that. I feel like they're a really good flat kind of product to have. So that is how we're going to leave these, and don't be tempted to spray this. I know when you're doing a background, you kind of get to this point, or you know, you wouldn't see a pattern, but you get to this point and you'd be like, oh, that's a little bit too speckly, it's not quite blending as much as I want it to. But you can't do that for this one, because if you spray it now, you're going to lose all of the trees, because we only want the powders to stick where there's water. So we can't spray over the top of this because we will just completely obliterate what we've done. So we've got to trust that it's going to do good stuff, and we've got to leave it. And then when we come back to it, we should have gorgeous variegated backgrounds like this that we can turn into beautiful sparkly Christmas cards. So I will see you in a second to finish off the cards. Okay, so these are the dried backgrounds. Now I would usually do this next step over the bin, so you can see how the water has kind of dried and you're left with the excess powder sitting on the top still. And I would usually do this over the bin just because there's not usually that much kind of excess. But if you have gone really heavy-handed with your powder and you've got some sort of big areas and you don't really want to waste it, although it's not really that much compared to how much is in your pot. But if you wanted to get you know, another background out of it perhaps, or you know, just some excess card that you might want to die cut a sentiment out of to go on top of one of these or something like that, you can carefully dust your backgrounds onto your Easy Clean mat rather than over the bin, and then we can actually spray this with water and use it to create a watercolory background as well. So I thought I might as well show you that in this video too. Now this one, compared to my original, has gone slightly more blobby, which I presume is because I was probably talking and spraying too many sprays of water onto it, and you've got trees that had more puddles into them, so they're not quite so like little speckly sort of areas of the colour. They're very blended, but that's like a different kind of look that you can get then. So if you add more water, you're going to get more blending of your colours in the little trees, but if you add less water, you'll get more of that speckling kind of effect. And in some areas the water has like seeped under the stencil, so some of the trees are kind of joining each other. So you might want to try this a few times and, you know, try with less water the first time, and maybe remember how many sprays of water you use if you are going to like create quite a few of these backgrounds, because they're nice and quick and easy. You just sort of need to leave them to dry. That's sort of the longest part of them really. But yeah, just play around with how much water you add, but I think it gives a fantastic look, and that combination of the colours that we've used as well looks brilliant. So this one didn't have too much excess. I don't think you can actually see any of that, but I can see from this angle definitely some of the mica that's on there. So I'll put that one to one side, and then this one definitely has more on there because you're trying to get the powder just to those sort of skinny areas between the trees. You tend to go a little bit more heavy-handed on this version. So this is kind of the background that you might want to recreate another background or two from by just utilising all of the powder that's left on there. You can see it sort of accumulating on the mat there. So we might even be able to get a couple of watercolory sort of backgrounds out of this. I'm using this little soft mermaid brush that I got a while ago. It's literally just like a soft bristle brush. The one that I use, the blusher brush that I use to get rid of excess anti-static powder, that kind of a brush would be perfect as well. Just make sure if you do use one for anti-static powder that you keep that one just for that, because if you've used some sort of mica or you know, another kind of product with it, you might get like coloured parts on a card that you don't want it on if you're using it for your anti-static powder. But any sort of soft brush will work nicely just to remove the excess powder, and then you can see the beautiful effects that you get and the sparkle that you're getting in those little areas between the trees as well. And for this one, you don't have to just leave it like this. You could, if you wanted to, bring that stencil back in, line it up over the top and use a 3D texture paste through there, a glittery one, a plain pearly one, a coloured one if you want to, anything that you'd like, or you could even just place it back on the top and ink blend through it as well. There's no like rules to how you have to do this kind of a background. I'm just sort of giving you an idea that you might not have tried before. So that is our beautiful tree background, and then look how much that actually came off that one that we can actually utilise and turn into a background or two as well. So I'm going to get my spray bottle of water. Because this is loose powder, I'm going to go really high. So I'm like probably 40-50 centimetres away from it, so that you're not actually blowing the powder anywhere. You're just sort of gently getting the water to land on it to activate the colours. You can see how much more colour was on there than you actually thought. There was a lot of dye particles in there as well. So I'm just going to go with an A5 piece of card because we can hopefully turn that into two backgrounds. And we can just smush this around. We can add a bit more water and dip back into it as well, or twist it around. But look, you can still get another background from all of the leftovers from this kind of card technique as well. So we can just keep squishing that in to completely cover our card and use up those little leftovers that in some cases there's really not that much to sort of play with, but in other cases if you do see that you've added excess powder, or you accidentally add you know, a big pile of powder onto your background, maybe you squeeze the bottle and a whole pile of powder came out, this kind of thing, once you've let that background dry, this kind of thing can be used to use up that powder that you squeezed out as well, so it's not going to be wasted. But we can just, oops, we can press this in, and I was trying not to get it on my hand because I need to film some other videos after this, but obviously when you try to be clean you always get it on your hands. But you can see there's that beautiful purple mica popping through in there as well. We could dry this and then like dab into it a little bit more to get some little speckly effects, so let's do that to show you what that will look like. And then when you keep drying the layers, you can just squish it back in and pick up extra like dots of colour. This is the wrinkle-free distress technique. If you look that up on YouTube, if you've not heard of it before, it's a Tim Holtz technique that he does with his distress ink pads, but you can do it with any kind of watered sort of medium, and anything that's sparkly. You can do it with flat colours, you can do it with spray inks, all sorts of different products that you have, and the Easy Clean Matte is brilliant for this, because if you work on your glass mat you don't get this beading kind of effect, you just get puddles. So I'm kind of giving you another background tutorial in this video, but yeah, I probably will do a fuller video on this technique as well if you're interested in it. But it's a really simple and been around for a long time, this technique. But we can just dry this again. And then let's press it in one more time just to try and get some of this excess. Okay, so we've actually got another background here. I'm only going to show you how to finish off the two that we have created with the actual tutorial of the water through the stencil, but you can definitely get two more cards out of this and finish them in a similar way, or do it in a completely different way, or you could use this to die cut some bits and pieces to use on another project, die cut some sentiments. You could like spruce this up a little bit with maybe some stenciling over the top. You could maybe do a little bit of stamping, then like stick a double-sided adhesive sheet over the top and add glitter to it. All sorts of different ways you can use beautiful backgrounds like that. Then there is also something else we can do with these final leftovers here. So this was the baby wipe I was using to clean up earlier. You can actually take this colour on the baby wipe and then take another piece of cardstock and use your baby wipe as an applicator to apply the colour as well. So you can get so much out of all of your powdery products whenever you use them. Don't think that you can, you're going to waste lots of stuff. You can actually use all of those little leftovers, although the pots are going to last you a very long time, and you can, if you want to, even wait for this to dry, like open it out, wait for it to dry, and actually use this to create a background or use it on a project as well, because it gives a cool like tie-dye kind of look. So you can definitely do that too. I thought I'd just throw in those tips as well. But I'll clean all of this up and then I'll be back to cut the cards to size and finish them off for you as well. So we've got our dried backgrounds now, and on the original cards I turned this one into a portrait card and this one into a landscape card, but I think I might try and do them the opposite way around this time, and do a landscape card from the full-on coloured one and then a portrait card from the other one, just to make them look a little bit different, so I'm not making 4 of the same card. So to trim these down, I think I'm going to start with trimming this side straight. Now I don't know if I placed my stencil straight on my piece of card compared to how my card is cut, so I'm just going to bring it up to the edge of my trimmer and use the grid lines along there to make sure it is straight, and just cut off that final little edge of the stencil, and then hold that into position. Then I know roughly on my trimmer where I like to cut my panels down, so I'm sort of eyeballing to that place. I don't want to cut any of this colour off, so I'm going to only try and cut a sliver off of there just to make sure it's square. Then I'm going to spin this round, and I know that the width I want to cut it to is 3 3/4 inches, so I'm going to cut it there. And then I'll just eyeball my length, because I tend to do my card blanks to that mark, so I'll just trim off that tiny bit of the bottom. So we've now got our panel for our portrait card, and you have to kind of cut them differently depending on how you want the Christmas trees to go. I mean, you could have a landscape card with the Christmas trees going side to side, but I quite like them being in their proper orientation of up and down. So this is going to be my portrait card, which I could use either way up. So as we're adding the elements on there, we'll decide which way up we want that to go. But we also have this piece left over, and from the original time I was cutting bits down from the first 2 cards, I also have these 2 pieces left over. So even though I'm only showing you how to create these 2 cards, we've got those extra backgrounds that we were making earlier, plus all of these leftover pieces that we can easily create into more cards as well. I don't think I'll show it in the video, but you'll have all of those pieces left over if you do create these as well. Or if you don't want to have pieces left over, just work on a smaller piece of card to begin with, and then you'll only really have the size that you want, maybe with a little bit bigger, so that you can trim off the edges if they go a little bit messy or anything. So for this one I want to do it landscape. Again, I want to make sure I've got a nice straight edge, so I'm going to just look at the pattern and just try and sort of eyeball getting it straight along the Christmas tree pattern and trim that off. Then this bit is a bit blobby here, so I'm going to make this the middle of my panel, because I know in the landscape orientation I'm going to lay the card out the same, and I know that my snowflake and my sentiment are going to go across the middle there. So I'm going to trim off this edge, because I quite like that, the way that's sort of splaying out in that top corner, so I'm going to keep that, but I'm going to just line that right up against the edge of those Christmas trees with the straight edge that I've already cut, and trim that off. Then I know widthways I like to cut it to 3 3/4, so I'm going to cut that there, and then I'll just do my length to how I usually cut it as well. So now we've got our landscape panel for this card with that blobbier part in the centre, because we know we're going to cover that as well. But we also have these leftover pieces too. So we could use all of these in conjunction with each other. We could create maybe, you know, cut this into a skinny panel, put this on a normal sized card and have this coming across the bottom, so you've got both pieces on one card. You could do the ripped piece one way, this piece the other way. You could combine all of the pieces together and have the ripped piece with the other bit there and this going across the middle. You could just use those 2 together to create the width of your card blank and have that kind of design. You've also got these speckly pieces from the edges as well that you can utilise, and we've got another one from this background too. So this could be a place for your sentiment to sit if you're doing a different sentiment. Maybe you've got a scripty die cut sentiment. You could cut it out in a dark purple or a dark green to go with your colour scheme, and then stick that over the top of there. So there's plenty of ways of using all of those extras, plus the baby wipe background, which has now dried, and you can see that beautiful purple mica popping through. And this is sort of screaming out to bring that stencil back in and do a bit of ink blending over the top, or a glitter paste or something over there to sort of finish off that background. And then we also have this background too, which again, the mica is popping out of that now it is dried. And that is a stunning background that again we can cut into at least 2 panels, or you could cut it into 1 main panel for a card and then 2 skinnier panels, and maybe combine them with some of this. You could have, you know, like a skinny panel of this with the Christmas trees going across. You could have the Christmas tree piece coming into the side of this and have that as a card off to there. So there's loads of ways of using all of those little extra pieces to create at least 3 or 4 more Christmas cards, I would say, out of that. So we're actually making 2, but we could get at least 3 or 4 more out of all of the leftovers. Then we can bring both of these in. I've got 2 more of the snowflakes cut out. This was from Sue Wilson's festive collection. It had a beautiful background die that goes around the edge of it, and then this snowflake fits in the middle. It was from her, I think it was 2021 collection. I think it was last year's festive collection. I'm pretty sure it was, but it's such a stunning snowflake. I don't think I actually have used it in a video before. I definitely did use it on some Christmas cards last year, but I don't think I filmed them. But absolutely gorgeous, this one. So I'm going to put a snowflake on each of them. Then for the sentiments, I went with this beautiful stamp set from Francoise. I think I mentioned it earlier actually. It's called Christmas Sparkle, and it's got these stunning large sentiments with this beautiful flourishy design in them. So if you wanted some new sentiments this year to sort of go with older products that you've got that you want to use again, I really love these because you've got 5 different versions. You've got Happy Christmas, Season's Greetings, Merry Christmas, Be Merry and Bright, and Peace, Love and Joy. But then you've also got 'Tis the Season to Sparkle, To You and Your Family, May Your Heart Be Filled with Joy, and A Time for Making Memories. So these could be inside the card with the big ones outside the card. You could just use the small ones. There's loads of ways of using this set. And this also came out last year, but I only just bought it because I remembered that I didn't get it last year. So really, really gorgeous stamp set. And to finish these 2 cards, I've got these 2 sentiments stamped out. I just stamped the first 4 of them out. So I've got Merry Christmas and Season's Greetings left. And the way I was cutting into these, so for this one, because I wanted to make this a portrait card, the sentiment would be edge to edge on the card blank, but I wanted it to be more sort of in the middle of the snowflake. So I snipped it into 2 pieces. I cut it into a rectangle first, but because the Christmas has the sort of swirl coming down the bottom, the rectangle was leaving a larger white gap at the bottom of the word happy, so I just trimmed that down to be even border all the way around once I trimmed it into 2 words. So how I trimmed these down, we'll bring our guillotine back in. And I was saying this in another one of my videos. I've filmed so many recently I cannot remember which one it was, but the way I line up to cut something straight is I'm looking through the plastic guide on the guillotine, and I'm looking at where the sentiment is underneath the plastic guide, and I can see that the plastic is about 1 millimetre above the sentiment on both ends, and then I'm going to cut. And it will be slightly further than 1 millimetre because the plastic guide isn't right against the blade, but then you get the perfect line that's an equal distance all the way along from the different words. So you just got to kind of look at the first and last letters of the words to kind of get that in a nice line. And there was sparkle under here from cutting the backgrounds, and I've got some on my sentiment, but it doesn't matter too much. But just make sure you wipe that guide if you've been cutting sparkly backgrounds, because you might get a little bit of powder onto there. Then to cut the other side, depending on how wide your sentiment is, you can actually just sort of judge where you're cutting it from looking at the actual gridded piece here. So I can see that I think I probably do want it about there. So I'm looking at the distance that this white card is coming into that first square, and then I'm going to eyeball it and try and get the same distance down here. Then I'll hold it into place and cut that, and then I should get a pretty even kind of border above and below all the way across that as well. So that is the first one. And then do exactly the same for the other one, although this one has got swirly designs above and below the words, so it's going to be a tiny bit more difficult, but you're just going to make sure that you've got the sort of top portion of each of those swirls an equal distance from the clear guide. And then we can cut that one and then flip it round, and then this one's got a really big S on it, so we're actually coming further into the grey gridded marks on there. And then we can hold that down and cut that one as well. So that is our second greeting cut into a nice little banner. Then we can place these onto our cards and decide which one we want on which one of the cards. I quite like the Merry Christmas going across this one, which means we might be cutting this one into 2 pieces, because as you can see, it goes all the way across the card, because it's a really lovely wide kind of sentiment, but I think I prefer the stacked kind of sentiment. So I'm going to take my long bladed pair of scissors and I'm going to snip Seasons and Greetings apart from each other, and then to mirror how much room I've left here, I'm going to cut this one to the same width. And then because when we were cutting this out, we were actually going for the width of the S to be our width of our rectangle, we now have Greetings, but it has slightly more white card along the bottom. So you could put this back into your trimmer, but I always end up nudging it and then it goes wonky. So I'm just going to use my long bladed scissors to cut along there, and then I'm going to snip again at the end just to make it a lovely little rectangle. And then we can use both of these on here like this. Another way that I often use sentiments like this, where they have letters or swirls that sort of come down beyond like the main line of the sentiment, I often draw a scribbly black box around it, but miss where the letter protrudes out of that little box, so that when I'm cutting along it, I would cut like up to here, and then I would curve round the S and then keep carrying on cutting along. So that might also be an option for you as well, but I wanted to keep these really simple, just with those block kind of sentiments. So I'm actually going to trim those 2 end pieces off of the Merry Christmas as well. And then to help them stand out nicely from the card, because the background is sort of like quite sort of intense with all of the colour on there, I'm then just going to take these pieces and stick them onto a piece of black card and then trim around them to give them a little tiny edge of black as well. But if you wanted to, you could definitely do the scribbly or just a straight box around them with a black pen and then cut around that if you want to. My glue has got a block. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then we can stick that onto there, and we'll do the same with the Seasons and the Greetings as well. Then I'm just going to use my long bladed pair of scissors to cut them out, but if you prefer to use your paper trimmer to cut them, then you can. I just find whenever I try and cut something up against something else on the paper trimmer, I get like 3 sides perfect, and then the last side is slightly too wide, so you try and cut it again, and then it's too small, and then you've got to cut the other 3 sides. So I just find with scissors I have more success, but however you like to mat and layer your sentiments will be perfect. So I'm just going to trim around those, leaving like a millimetre, just poking out the edges to give our little layered up sentiment. This is also a nice way of doing, if you are like batch making your Christmas cards, just having to cut your sentiments into rectangles does save a lot of time as well. And the fact that you've got so many sentiments on this stamp set, you can stamp them all in one go. I mean, if you were doing these kind of cards with the bold sentiments, you can stamp 5 sentiments in one go, which is nice. And then the final side. And then we can just start assembling the card, and then we'll pick out some sequins to go on them as well. And because this snowflake is 6-pointed, you can decide, do you like it with the 2 points pointing up and down, or do you prefer it to be flat with the points, and the points are going side to side. I think because I'm putting the sentiment across the middle, I'm going to do the points up and down so that the sentiment sort of goes across the middle and doesn't hide 2 of the points. You can still see all 6 of the points on the snowflake. And then I think I am going to go central for the design as well. The other one I did slightly off centre. I just moved the snowflake slightly over, but I do quite like it completely central on this one. So what I'm going to do first is take some low profile foam tape and put it on the back of my sentiment. And I'm going to cut another skinny bit to go on there. Okay, then I'm just going to gently place this on top of the snowflake, just to pick up the snowflake. Then once you've got that stuck to the sentiment, you can flip this over and add your glue. I am going to put glue on the back of this and also on the back of the snowflake where it's overlapping, and then I'm also going to put just some tiny bits around these sort of areas of the snowflake. And you shouldn't really see this on your card, especially because we've got such a busy kind of background, and it won't really reactivate the powders that are underneath there. So we can place that on in the centre and then press it into position and hold these bits down. Now sometimes it takes a little while for, you can see it's popping up again, for it to stick to some of these backgrounds. So you can either you know, just leave it for a bit and then keep coming back and pressing it to make sure that glue kind of grabs in the positions, or you can get a heavy block, which I've actually got my sentiment stamps on, and just leave it on top of there to help it stay down as well. Then we're going to come to this card. So we've got to decide now which way up do we prefer the background. Do we want the heavier kind of portion of the background towards the bottom, or do we want it towards the top? So I tend to put my snowflakes, or any sort of circular or any kind of element really, when I'm doing a little card, I tend to put it in the top third of the card. So, or the top 2/3 basically. So I'm going to put it about there, and then I've got to decide, do I prefer the sentiments on the snowflake with the background like this, or would I prefer if there was more colour behind the snowflake going to less? It is kind of personal preference to what you prefer. I do actually like it that way up. I was thinking the other way up to begin with, but I actually like it that way up. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. Put some foam on the back of our sentiments. And that's poking out a little bit too far. And then, again, you want to decide which way round you want your snowflake to be. I do prefer it points going north and south, I think. So we're going to place that down into the centre, and then we want to put the word greetings and seasons. And then for this one, I don't know if I did, no, I don't think I did do that on the original. We could, if we wanted to, stick this the same way as we stuck that one, or we could put some more foam tape behind these areas and make it look a little bit more raised up off of the background as well. So I think I will show you that too. Might as well show you different ideas of how you can stick it up and the difference that it makes as well. So we can do another bit of foam tape, and this is a low profile foam tape. It's only 1mm, so adding a 2mm depth shouldn't make it too thick to post, but if you are a little bit more conscious about the thickness of your card for posting, definitely use a lower profile foam tape, or just stick it flat if you want to, or just use the foam tape behind the sentiment and then stick the snowflake flat. So we're going to take that and then stick it into position. And then if I show you the comparison between the two, just using the foam tape, it just allows this to sort of raise up a little bit more. Also because we haven't put any glue behind it, but it gives it a little bit more lift off of the background. Whereas this one, it's stuck right onto the background behind the sentiment. So it gives a little bit of a different kind of look as well. Then, to finish off these cards, we're going to go with some sequins, or gems. And actually I should put them on their card blanks first. That's our first card finished, and comparing it to the landscape version. So for the landscape one, I basically used the entirety of the design because I put it right in the centre so I didn't get any of the fading off on the edges. But this one, I lent into the fading of it, and I really like that actually. I like that it's kind of fading into nothing. It looks really good. So those are those two versions. Then we're just going to finish sticking the sequins and gems onto this one. So lovely big dark blue gem there. Then we're going to put that sequin there to cover the little blob on there. And then a gem, another tiny sequin, and that little heart as well. I've never seen any hearts this colour. They're like a translucent bluey purpley kind of colour. They're really pretty. So we'll just put that down there. And there we go, we've got the landscape version of this card finished as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial video showing you how you can create backgrounds with a stencil, just spraying with water so it makes it a non-messy kind of version, flipping the wet stencil to get a second print, and then using all of your beautiful Pixie sparkles, Pixie bursts, your Nouveau shimmer powders if you want to as well, your colour bursts, your brushos, all of those kind of products will work really nicely for creating these kind of effects. Even mica powders actually. Some mica powders are activated by water, so some mica powders would work for this kind of technique as well. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye!